Ever watched a film and thought, that doesn't make any sense, why would they do that? Yeah, that usually means that the movie broke one of the most fundamental storytelling rules, and today we're going to talk about that rule, and a few others that make a story feel believable, no matter the genre. Because whether it's The Godfather, Parasite, or Oppenheimer, they all share the same backbone: classical structure. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what makes some films feel tightly woven and emotionally satisfying, while others just feel off. How even chaotic films like Everything Everywhere All at Once still rely on structure and internal logic. And why Hollywood keeps returning to the same story formula and still can't quit it. It's Karina with you. Let's dive in. The next element of classical structure, the relationship of cause and effect.
Cause and effect.
In real life, not all of your actions have a logical explanation. We often act under the influence of emotions, ones only we truly understand. But in films that follow a classical narrative structure, every action is a consequence of the previous one and a cause of the next. In other words, almost always, one action leads to another. That's the logic of storytelling. Without it, a film won't feel believable. Every single action must have a reason and lead to a consequence. It's the chain that holds the entire narrative together. Action becomes cause. Cause creates affect. The audience understands what motivates the character when they make a decision, which means they can put themselves in the character's shoes, or at the very last, understand their point of view. This isn't just technical, it's psychological. If we understand why a character acts, we can follow their logic. Even when we disagree, that's how empathy works in cinema. To see this more clearly, let's take a look at the movie Groundhog Day. Phil wakes up at the same day over and over. At first, he rebels, then he indulges, then he grows. And every tiny choice creates a ripple, new consequences, new possibilities. We as viewers accept this loop because the film respects its own logic. Nothing feels random. Now, compared to Everything Everywhere All at Once, that film jumps across universes like it's nothing. Chaos, right? But even in the madness, every action matters. Every jump, every bizarre choice, every battle follows internal logic of that world. Cause, effect. Always. When a movie breaks the chain without a reason, that's when you, as a viewer, go, wait, what? That doesn't make no sense.
Linear time.
Of course, films based on classical structure don't have to follow a strictly chronological order. The point of this element is that the audience should always understand exactly where they are in the story at every moment. It's our basic desire as a viewer to have a clear vision where we are in the timeline. Take flashbacks, for example. They're often visually distinct from the main storyline, usually through a different color palette, and it's done specifically so that the viewer don't lose track of narrative logic and can keep a clear sense of the overall timeline of events. That's why flashbacks in Oppenheimer are shot in black and white, while the present is in color. That's why The Godfather Part 2 uses visual tone shifts between Vito's past and Michael's present. Because if the viewer loses their sense of time, the story collapses. Even Inception, with its dream layers, makes sure we know level 1, level 2. Time moves differently here. Complex? Yes. Confusing? Never, because filmmakers orient us every step of the way. The next thing worth knowing in classical structure, a story always unfolds within a consistent reality.
Consistent reality.
A world with rules that never break. Sound obvious, right? But here's where it gets interesting. In film, there are generally two types of reality: consistent and inconsistent. The world we live in is an example of consistent reality. It has fixed rules that are never broken. For instance, people cannot fly without special equipment. Gravity always works. We cannot jump in time back and forth. These laws apply to all the humanity. A consistent reality assumes an internally stable world. Even the most fantastical worlds, the ones full of magic, sci-fi tech, or alternative universes, are built on rules, not random chaos. Rules, and I'm sure all of you know that more than anyone. An inconsistent reality, on the other hand, is a world where the rules can bend or break at any moment. Films like The Matrix, Jacob's Ladder, Coherence thrive in this space. These stories, reality is unpredictable. Time loops, identity crisis, and distorted perceptions aren't just plot devices, they're environment itself. This kind of storytelling is especially popular with indie filmmakers, often used to mirror the chaos or absurdity of real life. Just think of Everything Everywhere All at Once. Why it's surreal, it's disoriented, it's intentionally unpredictable. Now, that might sound chaotic, but here's the twist. Some of the most disciplined and well-structured worlds actually come from science fiction and fantasy genres. That's because in these genres, the creators have to think like architects. They are carefully design the laws of their universe, write down to what's possible and what absolutely not. Take Tarkovsky's Stalker, for example. The zone might feel mysterious, but it operates by consistent internal logic. Its dangers are unpredictable, but not random. In Harry Potter, magic isn't just a free-for-all, it has systems, spells, and strict boundaries. You can't just wish for everything, power has limits. And in The Lord of Rings, every magical object, every race, every region follows a clear set of rules. Gandalf doesn't solve everything with a wave of his staff. There are reasons why he cannot, and those reasons matter. So, while some stories embrace chaos, others build intricate realities, ones where the audience understands the rules even if the character is still discovering them. Take The Matrix, for example. When Neo dodges bullets in slow motion, do we question it? No, because the story told us Neo is the one. That's why he is gifted with powers beyond human limits. Extraordinary, superhuman capabilities. What you call reality is a simulation, the Matrix. These are the rules, and we, as viewers, accept this without any question because it makes perfect sense within the logic of Matrix universe. It's a rule of the world, not a random absurd event. Same with Harry Potter. Yes, they're magic, but it has systems, limits, and consequences. Audiences are fully willing to understand any rule as long as it's logically explained within the film's reality. That's the key. Now, compared to the chaotic films like Everything Everywhere All at Once, these films deliberately live in inconsistent realities. That's the point. They're anti-structure. They make absurdity part of the design, and it works because the break is intentional, not accidental. Twin Peaks, for example, especially its season 3, The Return, is best categorized as work with an inconsistent reality, though we can say it blends both consistent and inconsistent elements masterfully. The show frequently breaks narrative, temporal, and spatial logic. Characters change identities, time loops, or jumps without explanation. The scenes shift between dream, memory, or alternative dimensions. The Red Room, Black Lodge, operates with no stable rules. Dialogue is reversed, characters age unpredictably, and causality is ambiguous. Season 3 especially disrupts the viewer's sense of reality, pushing even further into the abstract and surreal, with entire episodes resembling non-linear art films. These are internal mythologies, lodges, spirits like Bob, Topaz, doppelgangers, suggesting a lore-based logic. Fans have built elaborate theories to explain it all, assuming some consistency beneath the weirdness. Twin Peaks is deliberately inconsistent reality. David Lynch avoids giving the audience a full rulebook, choosing mystery, dream logic, and emotional resonance over world-building consistency.
Endings.
And finally, let's talk about endings. The final element of classical narrative structure in film is closed ending. There are two types of endings in storytelling: open and closed. In an open ending, the filmmaker leaves the main question unanswered, inviting the audience to imagine the rest for themselves. The future of the characters is left unclear. Viewers are encouraged to use their imagination and decide how the story might have ended. And these imagined outcomes can vary wildly from person to person. Some might see it as tragic, others as peaceful or uplifting. But classical structure assumes a closed ending where the filmmaker answers all the major questions raised through the story. For example, in Kramer vs. Kramer, the central question is, who will the child stay with? By the end of the film, the question is answered clearly. The future of the characters is defined. There is no ambiguity around the story core issues. By now, you've probably guessed it. The classical structure is not the only possible approach to writing a screenplay. Robert McKee described in his book Story Structure 3 main types of story plots: Archplots, Miniplots, and Antiplots. Archplot is what we refer to as a classical structure. Miniplot simplifies or reduces many of its elements. In Miniplot, for example, you might have a passive protagonist or open ending, or a story focused on internal conflict. Films centered around seduction or introspective journeys are common examples. When we talk about mini-plot films, a few standout examples come to mind. Take Lost in Translation, released in 2003. It doesn't rely on big action or dramatic plot twists. Instead, it lingers in those quiet, emotional moments between two strangers. Then there is Her from 2013, and its core, it's not about technology, it's about a man navigating the complexity of love and isolation. The story unfolds almost entirely within inner world. And Call Me By Your Name, that film is a perfect example of emotional subtlety. The transformation happens quietly, and the ending, it's open, unresolved, and that's the point. These films don't chase clear-cut goals or explosive stakes. They lean into ambiguity, introspection, and letting the audience sit with the characters rather than race to a finish line. Antiplot, on the other hand, deliberately opposes the classical structure. These films exaggerate reality on purpose. You'll see inconsistent worlds, broken cause and effect chains, and nonlinear timelines. The filmmakers don't hide this from viewer. In fact, they put it in front and center. You can always recognize an antiplot and distinguish it from a poorly constructed classical structure. In Antiplot, breaking the rules of reality becomes a stylistic device used by the storyteller. If Archplot is an example of academic drawing, then Antiplot is like a caricature. Sometimes a film might even blend multiple structures, similar to how genres can be mixed. A great example is Amélie. It skillfully combines the elements of classical structure with surreal tone and a whimsical atmosphere. So then, why Archplot is so dominant? Why is it so popular? Well, if you look at the mainstream Hollywood filmmaking, you see a clear dominance of Archplot structure. As for why this is the case, you'll find out in the upcoming episodes. So, why does Archplot dominate Hollywood? Why do big studios keep coming back to classical structure over and over again? That's what we'll explore in the next episode. But for now, I want to hear from you. Do you prefer open endings or closed ones? And what's your favorite film with a perfectly consistent reality? Or maybe one with inconsistent? Drop it in the comments. I'm Karina with you, and it was part 2 of our series on anatomy of storytelling. Keep watching with your eyes wide open, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!